Today I will deliver a lecture on theories of social and cultural anthropology. In this unit, we will be discussing some of the main theories of social and cultural anthropology. In the second half of the 19th century, many contributions to anthropological theory were made by men who cannot be called true professional anthropologists. Most of them were in fact lawyers with extensive education in classical Greek and Roman languages and literature. They were interested in the customs of other people and read widely about tribal people of the world. Around the turn of the 19th century, anthropologists began to realize that their dependence upon ethnographic data from non-professional sources severely limited their research. Hence, they felt the need of making their own systematic collection of data in the field. Thereafter followed various field expeditions which showed clearly the value of doing one's own research from an anthropological point of view. Though in every age, anthropologists have been attempting to understand humanity as a whole, yet in reality they had only partial understandings. Yet each of these types of explanations has provided some limited perspectives on human behavior and culture. Let us take a look at the theory of evolution. Modern anthropology emerged from the intellectual atmosphere of the Enlightenment, an 18th century philosophical movement that stressed social progress based on human reason, and Darwin's theory of evolution. Two men of the late 19th century stand out above the others. Lewis Henry Morgan, the American, and Edward Bernard Tyler, the Englishman, may be considered true professionals, and each has been called at one time or another father of anthropology. Each took an evolutionary theoretical approach and developed a scheme of cultural evolution that described states of human history from distant beginnings to the achievements of the Victorian age. They used their own data collected in their travels as well as information from many other sources and fleshed out their schemes of human development, employing living tribal peoples as evidence of prehistoric societies. This practice came to be called the comparative method. They were also known as unilineal evolutionists. Unilineal evolution is the view that societies evolve in a single direction towards complexity, progress, and civilization. Although these 19th century thinkers shared the view that humanity was progressing through various stages of development, their views were ethnocentric, contradictory, and speculative, and their evidence second-hand, based on the accounts of biased Europeans. Nevertheless, despite their inadequacies and speculations regarding the evolution of society, these early anthropologists provided the first systematic methods for thinking and explaining the similarities and diversity of human societies. Another school of thought that used the comparative method to explain why different societies are at different levels of development was diffusionism. According to this school, societal change occurs when societies borrow cultural traits from one another. This theory developed in the early part of the 20th century. There were three major schools of diffusionism: the British version, associated with G. Elliot Smith and W. J. Perry, and the German version, associated with Father Wilhelm Smith. The American school is associated with Franz Boas. The British school derived its theory from research on ancient Egypt, as they concluded that all aspects of civilizations, from technology to religion, originated in Egypt and diffused to other cultural areas. The German school differed somewhat from that of the British. They argued that several early centers of civilization had existed and that from these early centers, cultural traits diffused outward in circles to other regions and people. In German, this view is referred to as the Kulturkreis or culture circles school of thought. In explaining why some primitive societies did not have the characteristics of civilization, the German school, like the British diffusionists, argued that these people had simply degenerated. An early 20th century movement that developed in response to the unilineal evolutionary theory was led by the US anthropologist Franz Boas. The American version is historical in its approach, stressing field research and restricted reconstructions of history rather than the comparative studies on a worldwide basis that characterize the two preceding points of view. Boas became a vigorous opponent of the unilineal evolutionists. His fieldwork experience and his intellectual training in Germany led him to conclude that each society has its own unique historical development. This theory is known as historical particularism. It maintains that each society must be understood as a product of its own history. This view led Boas to adopt the notion of cultural relativism, the belief that each society should be understood in terms of its own cultural practices and values. One aspect of this view is that no particular society can be ranked above another in terms of degree of savagery, barbarity, or civility. A direct outgrowth of the Boasian approach was the emergence of culture and personality theory in American anthropology. Boas trained two particular noteworthy students, Ruth Benedict and Margaret Mead. They maintained that each society and culture has a unique history. After studying processes such as child rearing and enculturation, they proposed that every culture is characterized by a dominant personality type. This school, led by Mead and Benedict, encouraged more careful research regarding personality and culture. Now, there is better understanding of enculturation and personality formation in human societies. Boas's efforts set the stage for a sound scientific approach in anthropology that led to definite progress in our comprehension of race and other issues in explaining human behavior and culture. During the 1930s, the American anthropologists had begun working in Oceania and Africa, and Herskovits established the first African Studies program in the US at Northwestern University. But the Boasians were interested in change and cultural dynamics, whether in one area of the world or another. The concept of acculturation was first developed by Redfield, Linton, and Herskovits in their joint paper entitled Memorandum on the Study of Acculturation in Journal of American Anthropologists, published in the year 1936. According to them, acculturation comprehends those phenomena which result when groups of individuals having different cultures come into first-hand contact with subsequent changes in the original cultural patterns of either or both groups. Acculturation studies attempted to be studies of change in process. Though theoretically, the studies could be made on contact situations between two non-Western societies, in fact, virtually all were between a native group and an industrial Western group, and only rarely did they actually deal with the two-way nature of change, usually examining change only as it affected the non-European society. This interest in cultural processes gave a new impulse among Boasians to generalize about cause and effect and to make cross-cultural comparisons about the mechanisms or common properties of changing cultural systems. At about the same time, functionalism developed in British anthropology. Now, what is functionalism? Functionalism is the view that society consists of institutions that serve vital purposes for people. The school of functionalism is divided into two camps, each associated with a prominent figure in British anthropology. They were A.R. Ratcliffe Brown and Bronislaw Malinowski. The type of functionalism associated with Ratcliffe Brown is referred to as structural functionalism. According to Ratcliffe Brown, a society's economic, social, political, and religious institutions serve to integrate the society as a whole. Malinowski's functionalism focused on how society functions to serve the individual's interests or needs. This view is known as psychological functionalism. The functionalists were not concerned with the historical development of differing institutions, but rather focused exclusively on how these institutions serve society and the individual. So, they fail to explain why societies are different or similar. As they tended to view societies as static and unchanging, they were also unable to explain social and cultural change very well. But functionalism as a school of thought has influenced a great deal of research in anthropology and encouraged the collection of valuable ethnographic data. French structuralism is another approach and is pioneered by Claude Lévi-Strauss. According to Lévi-Strauss, structuralism is a search for deep, unapparent, innate structures of a psychobiological nature universal to all human beings. The primary goal of structuralism is to investigate the thought processes of the human mind in a universal context. Structuralists are interested in the unconscious and conscious patterns of human thinking. But his work also faced criticisms. Many scholars questioned whether he has discovered universal structures or invented them. Another criticism leveled against him is that he has created a closed, mentally deterministic model, but this is not substantially true. He is not attempting to explain diversity, though he recognizes its existence. Some anthropologists renewed their interest in evolutionary explanations of social and cultural phenomena after World War II. Anthropologists like Leslie White suggested a new 20th century perspective on the evolution of society, which is referred to as neo-evolutionism. According to White, culture evolves as the amount of energy harnessed per capita per year is increased, or as the efficiency of the instrumental means of putting energy to work is increased. White perceived three cultural subsystems: technological, sociological, and ideological. The way society uses its technology to sustain life influences the sociological and ideological systems. Technology and therefore culture evolve as more energy is harnessed. However, in his search for regularities and causation, White was also joined by Julian Stewart. Stewart focused on how specific socio-cultural systems adapt to environmental conditions. According to Stewart, human societies must react to environment, and in the course of adapting to environment, humans introduce a superorganic element. Stewart proposed the study of cultural ecology, the relationships among environment, the human organisms present, and the superorganic element that is culture. In the early 60s, Marshall Chalins, Elman Service, and other followers of White and Stewart tried to reconcile the two viewpoints. They suggested that evolution has two facets. One is general evolution, a grand movement from simple to complex, and the other, specific evolution, change as an adaptive response to an ecological niche. Stewart's multilinear evolution is specific. White was talking about general evolution. Though both Stewart and White used concepts of evolution, the idea of evolution is less important than their turn to some type of techno-environmental causation, where priority is given to the material basis of social life. As an outgrowth of neo-evolutionism, a school of thought known as cultural materialism developed through the writings of Marvin Harris. It is a research strategy that focuses on technology, environment, and economic factors as key determinants in socio-cultural evolution. Cultural materialists divide all socio-cultural systems into infrastructure, structure, and superstructure. The infrastructure includes the technology and practices used for expanding or limiting the production of basic resources such as food, clothing, and shelter. The structure consists of the domestic economy, that is family structure, domestic division of labor, age and gender roles, and the political economy, that is political organization, class, castes, and police, military, etc. The superstructure includes philosophy, art, music, religion, ideas, literature, advertising, sports, games, science, and values. The cultural materialists stress the point that technology, energy, and environmental factors are crucial to the development of all aspects of society. This theoretical approach is an extension of the foundations laid down by White and Stewart. However, Harris was criticized for focusing too much on environmental factors and neglecting social, political, and religious values and beliefs. In addition, cultural materialism tends to emphasize the infrastructural mechanisms that determine the structure and superstructure of the society. This leads to a form of technological determinism, which is too mechanistic to analyze the socio-cultural conditions in a society. After World War II, American anthropological research expanded into new regions geographically, into Oceania and Africa, and theoretically into psychological, acculturation studies and peasant studies. At about the same time, the British anthropologists developed an interest in environment and economics. Most anthropologists would agree today that no one theoretical stance holds all the answers. British, American, and French anthropologists have enriched one another's thinking. Until after World War II, most anthropologists were Europeans investigating non-Western societies. But today, many non-Europeans with new, fresh ideas are entering the profession. Among the other notable anthropologists who contributed towards the theories of social and cultural anthropology, mention may be made of Redfield, Marx, Leach, Durkheim, Kroeber, and others. However, after more than a century of anthropological research, there exists an improved and more comprehensive understanding of culture, society, and the role of the individual behavior than it was in the 19th century.